kingdom was torn by a civil war in the wake of the death of the king. His firstborn and heir was betrayed by her aunt, who long had schemed her niece to supplant, promising gifts of the land she would storm to give to the nobles who joined her thieving. The young queen proved not the fool the countess thought, and was ready to face the traitors. When they marched south from her aunt's county, those treason-tainted men of her army, they were unprepared and doomed once caught by loyalist troops, in numbers the greater. Thus, at the border of the northern counties, amidst a plain of endless snow and stone, loyalist and traitor armies clashed, spear-tips ripped at flesh, iron mattocks thrashed. Though the faithless countess was not to be seen, yet she did not cower, nor had she flown. For in the north she'd left her chaff to fall, on pain of death she'd pressed near every man, from the blacksmiths to the dung-shovellers, she'd left thousands to fight and die for her, clad in naught stronger than their woollen shawls, with scant fiercer than sticks in too many hands. The countess, meanwhile, took her true army, and she sailed south in a wide half-circle, set to arrive, as best as could be planned, on the southern coast, whilst the foe held her land. 2 days away lay the capital and queen, her own kin, who she would gladly strangle. Her force was small, scarcely 1,000 strong, yet the strength of the loyalists was elsewhere. Once her rival in this war was butchered, what choice would the snipes have except surrender? Paltry rebellions would not last long, no inch of disciplining wrath she'd spare. The village, hight Spingham, lay near the road the traitors took to the capital's gate. At the countess's command 50 sped to pillage provisions for the days ahead. They were free to pay for their takings with woe, a display to her enemies of their fate. Now in Spingham they knew full well what drew near, for the traitor forces were not subtle. Most of the folk made haste for the city, spurred by rumours of the countess's pity. In an hour's time all had disappeared, save one strange loon, who planned a rebuttal. Blackhanded Jack, the old butcher of Spingham, stood in his shop, armed with his best cleaver. Never before in his life had he fought, nothing of fighting had he ever been taught. His name he earned when fire claimed his hand, so that only an ashen husk lingered. He was too old to flee beside kin and kith. Though they protested, he'd only slow them down. Yet for his daughters' and grandchildren's sake, a spectacle and bloody mess he'd make, one to best delay the traitor bastards with, and grant his people the greater stretch of ground. Sounds of ransacking and worse were soon heard, and then a booted foot kicked in his door. In stepped a brace of ham-skulled armoured knaves, behind them a churl with a grin depraved. "We're closed," said Jack to the intruding curs. "Now take your unwashed selves out of my store." The three laughed swinish laughs, and the weasel who stood at the rear came swaggering on. "Truly you must seek death, you withered fool. We've come for supplies, and lest you'd make us cruel. Then your tribute of meat must be plentiful, and all must you yield to us anon. Think of it. The fare of your humble shop shall feed the army of the great countess, as she takes her rightful place on the throne, and makes this long-neglected land her own. 'Tis a glory your long years shall not top. Open your stores, greybeard, and count yourself blessed." Jack laughed so hard he nearly dropped the cleaver. If that beast were not grasping, there'd be no war. Nothing drives her save for power's whispers. They're urging that soulless monster onward. Not one strip of bacon shall I give her. Long live the true queen, the old king's firstborn. The weasel paused a moment. Then he nodded. "Yes, it is hard to argue with aught you've said. The countess is an evil, ruthless fiend, but I am not employed for truth, you see. I am her herald. Such lies must I spread. The truth I now share, 'cause you'll soon be dead." The herald made to draw his new-bought sword, thinking a lazy kill was his to take. But this leathery, one-handed butcher, in both wits and limb, was proved the quicker. The cleaver bit deep, the bare neck it tore, a crimson carcass on the floor to make. The lack-witted lackeys gawped for a trice, ere Blackhanded Jack claimed 2 fingers from one. They beat the old man till his legs gave out, then drew their own swords with murderous shouts, and the dying butcher felt the blade slice in the final moments ere he was done. Later, when the pillagers searched his stores, they found 100 barrels of salted beef, with cuttings of fresh venison and pork, enough for 1,000 men before their walk to claim the capital and show their scorn to the queen who caused their lady such grief. They left the plundered village set ablaze, and bore what they'd stolen to the countess. When they made camp that night, there was a feast, and of the meat they took near all did eat. They had reached the capital on the next day, rested, well fed, rife with dark eagerness. Yet the day came and went, with no army marching to the gates as the villagers told. The queen sent scouts parallel to the road to learn how much fear on the next day was owed. They smelt the answer before any could see aught of Blackhanded Jack's vicious scold. About their camp the countess's men writhed, 1,000 souls voiding stomachs and bowels, for the meat they'd eaten had been poisoned. At a stroke every soldier's grit was gone. Well, the night before they'd been glad and blithe, now their spirits, like their breeches, were foul. The countess herself tried desperately to wrench her shaking legs and trembling stomach away. Through the pain her rage shone like some fell sun, so close, and now so stupidly undone, with no kingdom but inescapable stench, no hope, save maybe to be swiftly slain. Blackhanded Jack had been married many years to an apothecary who had taught which herbs and plants he could use to season, and which he must avoid, lest he poison. The latter he scattered o'er the beef and deer, and then for this poisoned meat he had fought. He had guessed and hoped, and been proven right, that none would question the meat he defended. Thus the guts of the foe would know such a rack, so twisted by the blackened hand of Jack, that now a few hundred city guards might easily see these vile traitors ended. The queen, when told all, ordered a fire to completely burn the entire scene. There must be revenge for a village sacked, and they risked a plague if they did not act. The deed and the day were grim and dire, yet not half so dark as it might have been. The foolish war was ended that very day. The countess they found dead and frozen that night. The people rejoiced to be rid of the strife, and celebrations in the realm were rife. Though heavy the costs with so many slain, the end of it all, if naught else, was right.